Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface8020, back again with another great commentary. So I've talked before about at least one other video, I think maybe more, about my struggle to get off Effexor, which is I think in the past I've called it an SSRI. It's actually an SSNRI, if I'm correct. If my understanding is correctly. So, quick rehash, or I hope quick rehash of the deal with me and antidepressants and SSRIs. Had a nervous breakdown when I was 17, and I was put on a combination of Zoloft and Wellbutrin, which worked really well. It really, resolved my, the depression that I'd been dealing with for, well, not really depression per se. I mean, basically, I just couldn't sleep. For the year or 2 years before that, I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I wouldn't say I felt depressed or anything. I mean, I had anxiety, but I mean, I've always been like that. So I don't even think that was worse. But it helped my sleep problems, and yeah, really, I mean, it really helped a lot. I was on that until for like about the next 7 years, maybe not, maybe like 6 years. I think it was like 6 years. Say 6 years. I don't know. It was like 6.5, 7 years, something like that. And but it got to a point where it was like, I knew from like missed dosages and stuff that I could sleep just fine without it. I wasn't having any like at this time, and I've mentioned this in the previous videos, I don't like to use the word depressed in this context because it wasn't like depression to me is more of like a chemical thing. There was stuff that I was dealing with internally that was caused great sadness to me, but I wouldn't say depression. But I had some sadness. I wouldn't say I was depressed. Like I was able to function fine. Didn't have any of that internal chemical stuff. But in terms, and like, and so yes, I had sadness, but I thought it was mostly under control. So I was just feeling like this stuff, I just physically felt like it was just making me feel groggy, and I wasn't getting anything out of it. So I quit cold turkey. I was on 200 milligrams a day of Zoloft and 200 milligrams a day of Wellbutrin, and I quit them both at the same time, cold turkey. And this was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly how it went, but I do remember never having any depression or anxiety during the withdrawal thing. I recall the withdrawal symptoms lasting for about a week, but they were just basically extreme like fatigue and lethargy and very dreamy sleep. So I would go to sleep and I'd sleep for like a long time. I'd sleep like 10 to 12 hours a day, which even for me is long. And every excuse me, every minute of the night was a dream. Like they weren't nightmares or anything. It was just very dreamy. And so I mean, unpleasant, but whatever. Like I say, it took about a week for it to get and then I felt fine. Felt like basically exactly how I was before I stopped. So I actually a little bit better because I didn't have the medicine making me groggy anymore. It wasn't like night and day or anything. So yeah, then so that's okay. I was fine until and that I expected that to be the end of it, but then again, previous videos mentioned this. Had that suicide attempt. In the aftermath of the suicide attempt, I was just a complete basket case, and they had to put me on something else, and they put me on Effexor, which I've been on ever since. So a long time now. We're approaching well over 15 years at this point. We're in that 15 to 20 year range. So in those 15 to 20 years, I've tried to get off it many times. And you can even somewhat say I did kind of get off it at various times, but that kind of depends on what you mean by getting off of it. You know, what I've noticed, my first time trying to get off of it was actually my most successful. And this would have been when I was 29. And I was feeling really good, really good, almost manic. I felt really good. I think at the time I weighed about 155 pounds, so like 40 pounds less than I weigh now. And like, again, I was 29. I was a young man, so I was, healthier than I am now. And I was in kind of, like I said, a manic state, and I was eating a very healthy diet. I just, just felt like great all around. So I was like, I can get off this, and I want to get off this. And so I quit cold turkey. I was on 150 milligrams, and I quit cold turkey. And it was, like, the thing about Effexor is it's generally regarded as the hardest SSRI or SSNRI to get off of. Its side effects are regarded as the worst, or its withdrawal effects are regarded. Its side effects are bad too. That's why in the psychiatric community, instead of Effexor, its nickname is Side Effexor. That's hilarious, right? And so the withdrawal symptoms, again, this was a long time ago. I was only 29. I don't really remember how the first few days went. I think I just remember feeling like sort of like this general withdrawal-y feeling. And it's hard to describe it if you haven't experienced it yourself. I think it's what I was experiencing was what's often described as brain fog, which is a very common symptom of withdrawal from Effexor. But the thing is, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, I'm not sure I would really use brain fog as a descriptor. Like, yes, there is that thing there is that element that can be best described as brain fog, but for me, it's not so much the brain as the entire body, including the brain. It's like this sort of like fog. I just call it a withdrawal-y feeling, but you can call it like a foggy feeling. You just don't. I don't really think of like your brain. You think of your brain. Brain fog makes sense, but like, how can the rest of your body feel like it's in fog? But it does. That's like I don't know, like an internal foggy feeling in your whole body. That's kind of how it felt. So I remember that, again, unpleasant. However, there was no like return of the depressed mood until about this like brief period of time. I would say from like 106 hours, like after my last dose, somewhere between like 106 and 112 hours after the last dose of Effexor I had taken, I was hit with just crushing depression. I don't recall there being too much anxiety. Like I said, it was a long time ago. And for me, depression and anxiety are very closely related. Sometimes it'll be depression, sometimes it'll be anxiety. It'll bounce back and forth. When I do feel depressed, it's kind of an anxious depression. Depressed mood, I mean. Not everybody's depression is necessarily that same type. And I know I've talked about that before too. So like I said, somewhere in that 106 hour to 112 hour mark after the final Effexor dose, yeah, it was like really bad depression. And it was really weird too, because it was like I wasn't sad about anything. In fact, I was actually still in that semi-manic state where I felt like really good about myself and about my life. And yet I still had this like just like, like, I guess like really like crushing internal, internal depressed feeling. And, which gets back to like what I always said, like depression is not sadness. They're just completely different things. It's not that one is better or worse than the other. They're just different. It's like saying like it's like saying that smashing your hand with a hammer isn't the same as smashing your foot with a hammer. Like, which is worse? It's like, well, I don't know that necessarily. I mean, that probably depends on the person. It's not really that one's worse than the other. It's just that they're different. They're different parts of the body. And this is the same type of thing. Depression and sadness are just different. you just feel them differently. And the so so yeah, but anyway, I was determined. Like, even when it came pretty hard, I still, like I said, I still felt, like I said, good about myself, good about life, and I just felt like, look, this is just a withdrawal symptom. I'll get through it, and I did. It did pass. It seemed like, and again with the same disclaimer, it was a long time ago. As best as I could tell, it seemed like it cleared up around the 120-hour mark. I read like 120 hours after the last dose, it seemed like I had recovered. And in fact, and this often happens a lot, like right before my depression is about to get better, like is about to improve, it will get a lot worse. And then it will like get to a thing where it'll start rapidly improving. Now, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes it gets worse and it just stays bad. But when I do have those improvements, there's usually this part before where it gets really bad. And that's what happened this time. Like, I was feeling like withdrawally, foggy, whatever you want to call it, but not really depressed, maybe a little bit. Then like major depression for like a few hours. And then that started to improve. And like I said, around the 120-hour mark, I felt good. I felt, like I said, I didn't feel depressed. I mean, the Effexor had been working, so my mood wasn't depressed. And I felt back to baseline, back to my healthy baseline. I didn't feel better than when I was on the Effexor. Didn't feel any different at all. But I didn't feel any worse either. So I thought that was the end of it. I was like, okay, that was tough. That withdrawal was tough, but I got over it. I thought that was the end of it. But unfortunately, at some point during those 5 days, when I was first getting off, I did have a panic attack. It was the first panic attack I've ever had in my life. And then a few days after, my full recovery, what I thought was my full recovery, I had another panic attack. 3, 4, 5 days after that, I had another panic attack. That was a pretty bad one too. Which is strange. I had those panic attacks. I've never had panic attacks before. And I assumed that those were just, withdrawal symptoms from the medication. And that is a withdrawal symptom from Effexor. It's actually happened to me since then too, while trying to get off Effexor. But other than that, no, I was fine for as best as I can recall. I got off of those 5 days, and then through the whole next 7 to 9 days till getting through week 2, I was fine. Still felt good. And then it was somewhere in week 3 where I started to feel worse. First, I started to feel just like irritable at first, and then just kind of depressed. And then eventually it got to a point where the anxiety, like the depression, kind of turned into anxiety. And then it got to anxiety, like I can't really even function anxiety. Like a little bit I could, but it was like it got to the point where it was like difficult to breathe. It was that bad. So I had to go back on. I had to go back on the Effexor. And honestly, I didn't feel back to normal for months. For months after that. Although eventually things restabilized. And so I just figured, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be on Effexor for the rest of my life. And didn't really think too much of it. Except, what would happen is a few years later, I would be feeling much better again. And I was thinking, maybe I can get off this. But this time I didn't go cold turkey. This time I didn't go from 150 to 0. I went from 150. I actually went from 150 to 112 or something. Then from there to 75. Then from there to 37.5. And then from there to 0. Now, getting down from those lower doses, getting down from 150 to 112, once to 75 to 37.5. That was, unpleasant, but not that big a deal. I mean, it's unpleasant. And it was very similar. It's just, Effexor is, even when you're not just getting off it completely, just lowering the dose of Effexor is not fun. That could be the case, and I'm sure it is for a lot of people with other SSRIs. But like I said, Effexor is known as being the worst. And it was, it was bad. And it wasn't fun. So, but I got down to 37.5, and then I tried to get off again. I tried to get off completely. But the thing is, with Effexor XR at least, that's extended release, the kind I take, you can't go any lower than 37.5. So you think that they would make some lower dosages specifically for people who are trying to get off, but they don't. And so 37.5 is as low as you can go. And so anyway, went from 37.5 to 0. Not fun at all. Same type of thing happens where the, withdrawal symptoms, like, foggy feeling, and then increased depression, which gets very serious at around that 108-hour mark, and from the last dose. And that's where, that's where it's really brutal. But then, like it peaks then, the depressed mood does, at least. But after that, the fogginess is usually pretty much gone. And by the 120-hour mark, I'm free. I'm off of it. And felt fine. And this time, maybe it's because I went from 37.5 and not 150 down to 0. No withdrawal effects. No, the world withdrawal. No panic attacks. And and so I was off. It was free and clear. It was unpleasant, but I was free, and I was like, okay, I beat it. I know that's what I thought last time, but I was fine. I felt fine. And that was, so, I had no withdrawals. The withdrawal symptoms I'd been beat, didn't have any panic attacks or anything. Like I said, took 120 hours, but I felt fine. And that lasted for like an additional 3 or 4 days, at which point the depressed mood slowly started creeping back. And at first, it's just like, whatever, I can handle it and stuff. But it just kept getting worse, and I had to go back on. Again, the same type of thing. It took me, I remember calculating, it took me 7 weeks before I felt normal again. And me, being kind of an idiot, at least about some things, after I did feel normal again, I was like, hey, maybe now I should try to get off it again. And then the exact same, basically everything I just said, the same thing happened. I didn't even change anything. I just tried the same thing again and thought, well, maybe it'll work this time. And it didn't. Oh, you know what? I can't remember. I think this, no, you know what? Here's what I think happened. I don't think I did try it exactly again. I think what happened the next time is I got down to 37.5. And instead of going from 37.5 to 0, I said, okay, well, if you open up the, and I've seen other people on YouTube talk about this. There's other people who've dealt with, getting off Effexor. If you open up, like, these are XR things. So it's like the pills are like these plastic sheaths that you can take apart. You can twist them apart. And inside there's all these little pellets. That's the actual medication. Because it's extended release, so it like dissolves slowly in your stomach. So I just tried taking out just one pellet out of each pill. But no, that caused a relapse too. It caused, that time I don't think I even got off it. I think I had a relapse on like day 2 or day 3 or something and had to go back on the meds. So, okay, great. So that doesn't work. So I was like, at that point I was like, and again, it took me 7 weeks before I fully recovered. So, I was like, fuck this shit. I'm just going to stay on this. I'm not, this is ridiculous. And then, so then, so I was back, still on the same medicine, whatever. And then it was, I can't remember if there was one other time, but as far as I think I know, I stayed on it. And then, oh, right. That's when, I was having, as years went by and my fatigue problems got worse. So to deal with the fatigue, I did transcranial magnetic stimulation, hoping that that would help, saying like the fatigue's maybe, hopefully, just a residual symptom of the depression. Get the depression fully taken care of, and I'll get rid of the fatigue. So I started doing the transcranial magnetic stimulation. I did notice some improvements in energy level. I said, well, hey, maybe it's improving the depression itself, the depressed mood itself. At this time, I was only on 37.5 milligrams. Let me try to get off again. So I tried, 2 or 3 days. I couldn't do it anymore. The depression was too bad. It wasn't like the withdrawal symptoms, like the other withdrawal symptoms I could handle, but the depression was too bad. I had to stop. Like if you followed any of my other videos from back then, after the TMS, I had a really bad relapse with the initial depression, and my 37.5 milligram dose I ended up having to take it all the way back up to 150. And really, it took years before I got the depression back to where it was before the whole TMS thing. Years and, tens of thousands of dollars. Right now, I feel like I'm better than I was before all of that, but overall at least. But it took a long time to get there. It was a very expensive journey. And I definitely went through like a lot of really, tough depressive times there. There was one time that, there were 2 other times. There was one time was when I got my sleep apnea treated. That had an initial dramatic improvement on my depression. So I tried to... Actually, did I try to get off? I don't think I did try to get off that time. So but then there was another time where, my depression was getting bad again. So I something that had helped me in the past was to drink some raw milk. And now that had worn off, but still it had helped in the past. So I tried it, and it helped dramatically at first, so dramatically that I was like, okay, well, why don't I try to get off the Effexor again? I think at this time I was at 150, tried the cold turkey thing, lasted for like 4 or 5 days, had a relapse, and I've got a video up there about that. And, every time this happens, I always say, okay, I'm not going to, I've learned the hard way, I'm not going to try to get off again. So anyway, then I went on ketamine treatment recently. It's like I've made videos about that. Before my last ketamine treatment, I was like, I feel so much better. I'm going to try to get off this stuff, and then hopefully I can get off of it before, I want to get off of it before my last ketamine session. So like it can help with that, and then we'll see if that helps extend it. Made it like, 4 or 5 days, or I think I made it to like day 4. I don't remember where I made it to. I might have actually only made it to somewhere on day 3, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. The depression's too bad, and I went back on. Although this time I got back to my normal pretty quickly. It didn't take months to recover like it had in the past. I don't know if that's because of the ketamine or what. Whatever it is, it didn't take that long to recover. But anyway, so I said, okay, look, I'm at least for now, like maybe someday when I can try like some of the other treatments I want, like the mushrooms or something, I'll try to get off again, but I'm done for the time being. And that was my plan. But then the thing is that this time, like the last time I tried to quit, I wasn't just quitting Effexor 150. I was quitting Wellbutrin because I was back on Wellbutrin too. And I was on 150 of Effexor, and I think 150 of Wellbutrin too. And so the quitting them didn't work, so whatever, back on both of them. But then something really weird happened. It's a few weeks later, and I go to get my Wellbutrin refilled, because I have this prescription, I have a script written for it to get the Wellbutrin refilled, and the pharmacy says we can't refill it because it's on back order for the next 3 weeks. There's no pharmacies that we don't have any, and none of the other pharmacies have it. Like where there's just a massive Wellbutrin shortage for some reason. And so I was like, oh shit, like it sounds like I'm fucked. So I told my shrink about it, and I was like, can you prescribe me something that's similar to Wellbutrin to at least hold me over until they get the new stuff? And he said, yeah, and he did, but since they're at CVS, they're so fucking incompetent. When I went to pick it up, they were like, nope, nothing was called in. And I was just like, you know what? Fuck this shit, whatever. So I'm not really sure what my game plan was whether I plan on like going back to my shrink and asking him to call it in again or what. But whatever it is, I didn't have it. And by this point, I'd already been off the Wellbutrin for 2 days. But then I noticed that actually being off the Wellbutrin made me feel like a lot better, like way better. And people were like people who I interacted with were noticing it. In fact, I think that's around the time that I started making my frequency of my video production went like way up. Like a lot of it had to do with getting off the Wellbutrin, and I knew it wouldn't last because it never does. But like for a while, like I felt a lot better. So that was making me think like, oh, okay, well the Wellbutrin, which I definitely needed for a long time, was actually making me worse without me knowing it. Maybe the same thing's happening now with the Effexor. Now, I wasn't going to do anything completely moronic, like cut the Effexor down from 150 to 0 again. I've been through that too many times. But I said, well, what if I cut it down in half, cut it to 75? So I talked to my shrink about it. He said, sounds like a good idea. We did it, cut it down to 75. Same song and dance as always, unpleasant for those first 108 hours, particularly like around, like I said, around the 108-hour mark is where it gets really bad. Then maybe not so gradual, but like an improvement until 120, or between 1 hour 120 and 125, start to feel back to baseline in terms of mood. Plus having all the, other withdrawal symptoms go away. So I did that, got to 75, felt like, okay, well, you got to give this at least some time to see if it holds, see if I relapse. But no, like it happened like over, like, I waited in it, like, so it took like 5 days to get off, another 7+ days. I didn't feel any worse. I didn't feel any better either. I just felt the same. So I was like, okay, we can cut down to 37.5. The thing is, I didn't have access to 37.5, and it was going to be at least another 2 weeks before I would be able to get that script refilled. So then, this past Thursday, I woke up just feeling not great, and maybe a little bit depressed, not too much, just kind of, just like over it all, and obviously physically very tired because, sleep problems certainly can be a symptom of the depression. I think they are. But I definitely don't think the Effexor. I definitely think the Effexor makes it worse. And so I have to go to work, and so normally before I go to work, I take my Effexor. But I was just like, my body just didn't want to take it. I just really didn't want to take it. And I was like, maybe I start, depending on how I feel, I'll go and I'll start taking it again tomorrow. Maybe I'll even take it tonight. But right now, I'm not taking it. Right now, I just don't want to take it. So I didn't, and I just went in. And then again, something that I wasn't expecting happened. Like, I was expecting to at least feel a little worse. But I actually, like 3 or 4 hours after when I should have taken that dose, started to feel like a lot better. Like, my mood dramatically improved. I could feel my posture get better, presumably because of reduction in tension. I felt so much calmer. And even my fatigue improved, and certainly it had nothing to do with me getting any more sleep, because I just, I barely slept at all. But even the fatigue felt better. And again, same thing. I've been through this so many times. This always happens in that initial stage. I knew it wasn't going to last. I didn't think it was going to last. Wasn't expecting it to last. But I did think, like, well, let me try to ride this out. So I waited all the way till the next day. So we're at the 48-hour mark then on Friday. Still felt not as good as I had the day, like at the end of the day before, but still felt pretty good. The main problem at this point wasn't so much the return of depressed mood. It was the, like I said, the withdrawal-y, foggy feeling. And I noticed, like, at work that the customers were really pissing me off, like way more than they usually do, because they can be annoying. But like my temper was definitely shorter. Like, and because normally I'm pretty calm about that stuff, and so. But I like I said, okay, you know, like whatever. It's just it's everybody. That's a common symptom of Effexor withdrawal. Nothing to get stressed about. The problem though was by that night, it was quickly getting to the unbearable stage. We're like around the 56-hour mark here. Like the depressed mood was just too severe. So I sent an email to my shrink and I said, like, explained what happened. And I said, look, I don't want to take this 75 milligram dose because in some ways, even now, I feel better than when I was on it. What do you think about, because I had read about this before, what do you think about instead of me taking the 75 or you prescribing a 37.5 for me to go get, what do you think about just switching to another medication completely? What if we just go to the lowest dose of Cymbalta? Because there's at least one case study of somebody out there who used Cymbalta to deal with very severe Effexor withdrawal symptoms. Now, it seems to me kind of dumb on the surface. It's like, okay, you're going to treat the withdrawal from the antidepressant with another antidepressant, and it's even another SSNRI. Like, how is that helping at all? Then aren't you just going to be addicted to that other SSNRI? But supposedly they say, at least in this one case, that it's much easier to get off of. So if you do go to that stage, you know, if you do make it to that stage, it's easier with the Cymbalta than it is with the Effexor. And that this, like the case study I was reading, the woman who was getting off the Effexor, like she really couldn't get off the Effexor because her, like, gave her heart palpitations that were so bad she had to be hospitalized. And if you read about like the Effexor withdrawal horror stories, I've never really had the symptoms that they talk, but like what you usually hear for those is the panic attacks. Yes, I have had those, but not as severe as some other people. The ones that everybody talks about is these things called the brain zaps. I've never gotten that. I don't know what it is. And then there are the dizziness. I usually don't get that. I did get that a little bit this time. And what was the other one? It's like brain zaps, heart palpitations, panic attacks. No, like for me, it's just more of like I said, brain fog and body fog, aches and pains, you know, like flu, like, you know, aches and pains. The fog is really unpleasant. The aches and pains aren't that big a deal. But again, it's the depressed mood. It's the depressed mood is just agony. And, you know, it's difficult because you don't know, like, is this a withdrawal symptom or is this a return of the initial, is this just a manifestation of the underlying depression? And I don't know if there's any way to know. Like in the past, I've thought like, okay, it's definitely a return of the depression. Now I just don't know. I don't know. And you know, since everybody's withdrawal experience from Effexor is so different, there really is no way to know. It's just something you just have to figure out for yourself. So I was like, what about like instead of like, what about just putting me on the lowest dose of Cymbalta? And I sent him the article of the other woman, and like of that woman who used it to get off. Like she couldn't get off Effexor at all. Then she used the Cymbalta and was able to easily get off. And he said, yeah, this makes sense, except for, you know, other patients I've had have a hard time getting off Cymbalta too. But it sounds like you're already in a tough place. You know, you're already not feeling well. So okay, well, let's try the Cymbalta, see what happens. So I would like, by this time the depression was really bad. And I said, look, I'll try the Cymbalta and I can make it till tomorrow morning. And if I don't feel better, then I'll just go back on the Effexor. And so I did the Cymbalta, and it actually made me feel better very quickly. I would say within half an hour, I noticed an improvement because I was feeling really bad. And not just an improvement in the depressed mood, but an improvement in the withdrawal symptoms too, which makes sense when you think about it, because you usually don't get those serious withdrawal symptoms unless you're cutting, in my experience. I usually don't get the serious withdrawal symptoms unless I'm cutting all the way down to zero. I get some depression, but I don't get like the sort of brain fog, body aches, stuff like that. So those mostly went away, not completely, but they mostly went away. And the depressed mood really improved a lot too. So I took that, the next afternoon, I slept in pretty late, and early the next afternoon, even though it hadn't been 24 hours, I took another 20 milligram one. And then early this afternoon, I took another 20 milligram one. So 3 dosages. And I was feeling pretty good. I mean, it was a pretty easy transition until as we got later in the day today, this day that just passed, New Year's Eve. I'm sorry, I know we're in New Year's now. Happy New Year's, everybody, by the way. As New Year's Eve went on, the depression was getting worse. The depressive mood was getting worse. And then come that 108-hour mark, it was really bad, like really bad. And I was just, I mean, like, I've been through it so many times that I was like, okay, look, it's probably going to be okay by around the hour mark, 120, so I can hang in 12 hours. But if it's not, I'm going back on the 75 milligrams of Effexor because I can't deal with this. This is just too bad. And but yeah, so like as it, kept getting worse and worse and worse, I would say probably around hour 109 is where it absolutely peaked. And it was that, but then very quickly started to recover. And, like right now, I don't know, I guess it's, hour 109 would have been at like 11 something. And what is it, 5 something right now? So we're at like hour 115 or whatever. And I would say right now my mood is probably 90% of baseline at this point. So, should be there by, like I said, like hour 120, 125, basically another 5 to 10 hours. We'll see. I should be very close to 100% by then. And then we'll just have to see if it lasts. If it does, then, I'll have 26 pills of 20 milligram Cymbalta left. So I would stay on it for at least 26 days just with that dose, just, to make sure that there's not going to be any relapse or anything. And then then I can actually say I am off the Effexor. I mean, I'm on another SSRI or an SSNRI, but I am actually off the Effexor for the first time in forever. And then at that point, if I'm feeling well, then yeah, absolutely, I'll try to get off again. Because I would love to have this done with. This stuff sucks. But we'll have to wait and see. So I don't know if there's anybody out there who's looking for information on getting off Effexor who might see this video. Maybe they're not going to see it now, but maybe they'll be looking 3 years from now or whatever and see it. Maybe this will be helpful to them or other people, anybody who's, dealt with trying to get off SSRIs. If you're not somebody who's like dealt with or had to deal with SSRIs, I would imagine this was all like really boring. I'm assuming you stopped listening pretty early on. I hope you did. But yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing I would say though is if you were somebody who was listening, don't let my experience discourage you from getting on an SSRI if it's something that, you need to. I mean, like, I would advise anybody to like use caution, and I don't believe SSRIs should be a front line of defense for depression. I think they should use stuff like ketamine or mushrooms or stuff like that. But, that's not always, it's like right now it's not possible. And even like practically there's only so much you can do, as well. But like the fact is, like SSRIs did literally save my life. Like I absolutely, I don't know if I'd be dead or not because I don't know. I can't imagine myself ever having the guts to go through with it, suicide, but I certainly would be non-functional. I would have been non-functional for years if not for SSRIs. So, get the depression fixed first and then you can worry about it. I mean, there's plenty of very successful people who are on, and in fact, I even read an article, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, about a guy who wrote like an article in the Washington Post about his own experience getting off of SSRIs. And he said he regularly gets emails from like really successful people, like, like he's like Google, like executives at Google and shit, who are like high functioning and have the same thing. They're on SSRIs or SSNRIs that they just can't get off of. And like, okay, it's a risk, but the point is that these people are high functioning. And if it wasn't for the SSNRIs, a lot of them probably wouldn't be, because they wouldn't have gotten there in the first place. And a lot of the times, well, I think a lot of this withdrawal stuff from SSNRIs or SSRIs, I think a lot of the reasons they're so hard to get off of is because the initial symptoms are returning. I think that's a big part of the problem a lot of the times. So yeah, so definitely don't think like, yes, be careful, use caution like any other medication, but absolutely use caution. Don't get on an SSRI or SSNRI without consulting with your doctor, but don't like write it off. Absolutely, say that you're never going to be on it just because you're worried you might get hooked and not be able to get off. You know, that being hooked on an SSRI sucks. I can tell you firsthand, it's not pleasant, but it could be way worse. It's not. Sometimes it beats the alternative. That's all for now. See you in the next.